So I'm going to be talking about step 5, admitted to God, ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. I'm Rebecca. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, everybody. My sobriety date is October 4th, 2021. And I'm very nervous to speak about well, just in general in public, but I've learned that all the things that I used to be really worried about doing, I always felt better after I did them, and that's just a constant thing. So here we go. I've been blessed with the opportunity to work the steps with my sponsor. And it's interesting because before I started work on my recovery, I pretty much didn't want to think about any uncomfortable feeling. I was trying to get away from it as quickly as I could in any way possible. I would try to distract myself, TV, books. I would pretty much anything I could do to stuff it down. And then when I found alcohol, that became my favorite solution, because it just numbed everything down, right? When I approached my time to do, the 4th and 5th step, like many people I've heard, I had a lot of trepidation about it, because I never really wanted to face the wreckage of my past, right? And it's funny because, I had this idea that, it would be a really horrifying experience. I thought that, I would look at my past and then sort of delve into a shame spiral, which is pretty much how I always used to do things. And my fear for the longest time was that anything that made me really uncomfortable would make me want to drink. And I was like, I can't drink. So I wanted to just stay away from anything uncomfortable. But those things were just still below the surface, trying to get out the whole time. The interesting thing about what I actually ended up doing my 5th step with my sponsor, as it says in our 12 and 12, the need to quit living by ourselves with those tormenting ghosts of yesterday gets more urgent than ever. And the longer I didn't have, my solution of alcohol, the more evident it was to me that I had to do something about it. Once heard somebody refer to being a alcoholic who wasn't in recovery, actually just a dry drunk, was like having a toothache and you're just not sticking Novocaine in there anymore, but you still have the toothache. And I was like, that's really apt. It's, how uncomfortable it was for me. I've always been my own worst critic. And as I said, I had a tendency to, go down into a wallowing shame spiral whenever I made a mistake or even thought about a mistake that I'd made in the past. But the interesting thing was, through the process of sharing my past actions with my sponsor, I was able to see how fear had been behind everything that pretty much all my problems, everything had, was backed up by fear, fear of not being liked, fear of not measuring up to what other people thought, or what I had some idea of what I should be. And I was always looking for validation from others because I really didn't like myself or feel like that I was a valuable person. The problem with external validation is you constantly need more of that, and it still doesn't get in there. It still doesn't make you feel the same way it does when you actually like your own self. And it's funny because I was very, I wouldn't say reticent to try to seek a connection with a higher power. I just didn't feel like a higher power would actually like work for me. I didn't think that, I didn't grow up feeling like there was a God. And so I was like, I don't even know, like, how is this going to work for me? How am I going to, put trust into something that I don't even believe in, that doesn't make any sense, and my sponsor told me, we can't move forward without you developing a connection with a higher power. And so I started on that road. And the amazing thing was, when I made that connection and started to develop that relationship, I came to the understanding that my higher power knew me and loved me for who I was and just wanted the best for me. And that helped me in turn love myself, as trite as that sounds. And I've also come to understand that, making mistakes doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. I used to be like, oh, I did this bad thing, therefore I'm a bad person. But now I understand that if I make a mistake and then I recognize it and then I make amends for it, and also if I make a plan to not do it in the future, then I can use the experience as an opportunity for growth as opposed to an opportunity to just like go into that wallowing shame spiral, which was so common of me in the past. And it's also interesting that being honest about my own bad behavior and, that it was rooted in fear, also, interestingly enough, made me feel more forgiving and able to forgive of other people who wronged me, because I started to see them as just human beings who made mistakes, just like I'm a human being that makes mistakes. And that helps me understand that, give, it gives it, it puts me in the mind frame of being a lot more forgiving and giving grace to others, and not assuming the worst of them, assuming that they probably didn't mean to, and do something that was upsetting to me, and also just take personal responsibility for my own emotions, because I'm the one responsible for my own emotions. Nobody else can make me feel a certain way. Only I can. And another great tool, when somebody does irritate me, if I feel disquieted by something somebody else does to me or around me, is to take a moment and pause as opposed to just react, and think about, with curiosity and thoughtfulness, why is it that I feel this way? Why is it that this person, doing this thing that has nothing to do with me made me react in this kind of really negative way inside? And usually it all comes down to fear. It's some sort of feeling of my sense of self being challenged, or my perception of how the world is being challenged in my own mind. And when I think about it and examine it, it's a lot easier for me to, reach out to my higher power to support me in the process, and then just let it go. Another thing is that I've realized that I can live through all of my feelings. I used to think that somehow my feelings would take over and that somehow they end up killing me, which is not the case at all. As it turns out, I somehow managed to live through all the terrible feelings I had before, and I didn't even have the tools, and now I have the tools, right? And now every time I live through a difficult emotional experience, and I use the tools, I reach out to my sponsor, I go to a meeting, I read the big book, and I get through it without taking a drink. It's a reminder to myself that I can do this, I can continue on, using the tools, and I can get through it. And I always know I'll come out of the other side, I always feel better. The feeling only lasts a little short period of time, like a minute and a half, and if I just can say, just need to breathe, use my tools, and then I get out on the other side, and I always, I'm okay. And then I'm like, whoa, okay, that's another example of me managing to get through this rough situation. And also just seeing people in the rooms, it's so inspirational when I see other people who have been through difficult circumstances, terrible circumstances, and I see them using the tools in the program, reaching out, saying they need help, going to the meetings. And that always makes me think to myself, now I see an example of how somebody got through this other difficult circumstance and they made it through and they're okay. I used to think that the only way to survive was, not thinking about my past mistakes, just like trying to ignore them or push them away. But they ended up just being bigger and bigger in my mind, like, sort of like the thing that goes bump in the night. Like, it was like, I didn't even know what it was, but I knew it was bad, and I was like this like terrible fear. But looking at myself honestly and, sharing, my whole inventory with my sponsor and my higher power, made it so that I'm not living in fear anymore. And I realized that I don't have to feel ashamed of my past because I can do differently in the future. And I know that, with the help of my higher power and the tools that I've learned here in the AA rooms, my future can be beautiful. And that serenity that I've been chasing like my whole life, I'm like, I just want to be okay. I just want to be okay, and I realized that is actually possible for me, as long as I, keep on working my program. So that's all for me, guys. I hope you get something out of it, and thank you for letting me share. Go ahead.